Hey everyone, it's Christina Quick, the Tarot Biz Mentor here, and today I want to teach you all 36 card meanings of the Lenormand deck. This training is suitable for absolute beginners who are just getting started, as well as seasoned pros who wouldn't mind a refresher or another point of view. In these trainings, I will be using my own custom Lucky Clover Lenormand deck, and this deck will be for sale within the next couple weeks. I've already sent it off to the printers. I'm expecting to get a final draft here within a week and a half or so. So make sure you hop on down to the description box below, and in that box and in the first pinned comment, I will have a link that you can join my newsletter and you can get updates on when that will be released and up for sale. Also, if you're watching this a little bit further in the future, chances are that the Lenormand deck is actually already up for sale, so you might just have a link down there. So let's go ahead and get started. This is a beginner's series, and in this video, I want you to learn all 36 Lenormand card meanings quickly and easily so you can get started reading professionally right away. You don't have to sit around and practice for too long before you start charging money for your readings, especially with Lenormand. It's a fairly simple, straightforward divination system. So combined with this video and maybe doing like 20 practice readings for friends and family, I'm sure you could get started right away. So the very first card is the Rider. Number 1 is the Rider. And typically on this card, you will see a horse or a person riding a horse. Sometimes it will even be an image of somewhat of a jockey or someone playing croquet, something along those lines. And this card represents some type of incoming news or an important announcement that's going to be coming in. So it has an energy of something coming to you. It can also represent a physical package that's going to be arriving. Think UPS, FedEx, any type of important document or package that you've been expecting, something's going to be coming to you. It could also represent that a visitor will come by. So it's usually like a friend will come by, or friends and family might come visit. And it can also represent messages through a third party. So the energy around this card is always about there's a third party to it. There's something outside of yourself that is coming to you. And it could be coming to you through another person, or it could be coming to you through a package, anything like that. It can also represent sometimes if you're doing a reading, let's say you're doing a reading on whether, you're going to find some new life partner or you're going to find a new relationship anytime soon. The Rider card can represent, in that case, someone new entering your life. It doesn't have to be romantic. It can just be friendly as well. Number 2 is Clover. And Clover represents luck, opportunity, and good fortune. It represents a fortunate situation, something that just tends to work out. It could be a lucky win. It's a really, really positive opportunity. It can also represent a small amount of money. Now, if I am doing a reading and I'm looking for dollar amounts, typically I think of Clover as like maybe a couple $1,000s or less, anywhere from like a couple $100s to a couple like $1,000, that would be Clover. If I was looking at like thousands and thousands of dollars, I would be looking at something more along, I'd be looking for probably like fish. And we'll get to fish here in a little bit. But it's a small amount of money. It can also represent in a reading that something is worth the risk, or it can be a gamble, but most likely you're going to come out on top. It can also represent an unexpected gift. Number 3, Ship. Ship represents adventure, travel, and even commerce. It can represent an exciting new adventure. It can also represent traveling a fairly long distance. So when we think of ship and we think of like traveling, it could be either hours in a car, or it could even be traveling overseas. It can represent foreign commerce and trade. It can also represent more spiritually finding one's treasure or finding what makes one happy. We think about setting sail on a new adventure and following our heart's desire. It can also represent moving away from a difficult situation. Depends on, when you're looking at Lenormand, you want to see what the card is facing. So in this case, the boat is sailing to the right-hand side. So we want to look, what is it sailing to? And then on the other side, the boat is sailing away from something. On the left-hand side, what is the boat sailing away from? So when you do a reading, and let's say you have some troubling cards on the left-hand side of ship, you could probably read it as sailing away from something. But if you have fairly negative cards on the right-hand side, we see the ship is actually sailing towards that. So the direction that the ship is facing makes a big difference in how you're going to interpret the cards. Number 4, house. House represents family, comfort, and security. It's the place that you call home. It can also be your immediate family, your mother, your father, your siblings, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins. It can also represent feelings of comfort and security. It can mean the foundation of one's life, your morals, your principles, your values, you're really what you were kind of brought up to believe in or value. House can also represent a family legacy or familiar traditions, like do you celebrate Christmas? Do you do a reunion once a year? What are these family-like traditions that you do, whether they're, within the collective consciousness of celebrating holidays, or whether they're just silly, fun things that only your family does or your family is known for. Number 5, tree. Tree can represent health, ancestry, and fertility. Tree represents one's overall health and well-being. So if you were doing a health reading, you could shuffle the cards and you could find a significator for tree, and you could read the cards around there to get an overall health reading. It can also represent your ancestors or one's ancestral lineage. It can also represent ancestral inheritances and ancestral karma. More spiritually, it can represent your spiritual path. It can also represent fertility and procreation. So if you were doing a reading on someone who wanted to know if they were going to have a child soon or if they were ready to have children, the tree would be a really great omen for that. It can also represent a family legacy, kind of like house, but this is more like ancestral. And more, not so much like house is more like your immediate family, whereas tree is more like your extended family. And it can also represent your connection to your community as well, because trees are very communal spirits. It can also represent where you put your roots down, which is, kind of like home in a way. So house and tree are read kind of similarly, but there are, subtle nuances to them. Number 6, clouds. Clouds can represent uncertainty, confusion, and doubt. And clouds is another one like ship where you really want to read the direction of the clouds. Now, traditionally, there on the left-hand side, there are dark, ominous looking storm clouds. And on the right-hand side, there are the more white, fluffy kind of clouds. So if you are reading a grand tableau or you're doing a, let's say, 3x3 spread, anything to the left of the clouds card is kind of representing what's still kind of uncertain, dark, secret, hidden. And on the right hand side, it can show where there are maybe some minor complications, or that's where you're going to want to look. Are the clouds clearing up? So if you had cloud and then sun next to each other, that would say, confusion is going to be lifted or the truth will be revealed. But it represents uncertainty, doubt, confusion. It can represent unclear thinking, muddled thinking, not having all the facts. And it can also sometimes represent mental illness like depression. I've also seen clouds come up where they're talking about being on antidepressants or being on some sort of, substance like alcohol or drugs where the thinking is just not there. It can also be in any type of reading for Alzheimer's or dementia or anything like that as well. Clouds can represent complications and delays are imminent, and it's usually not like a catastrophic thing. It's just like there's going to be a little bit of a delay, or you need to wait until you have all the facts that kind of come to light, or it's not, things are uncertain right now, they're still kind of being worked out. Clouds can also represent a situation where all the facts are not yet presented. Snake. 7. Snake. Treachery, betrayal, and lies. Probably one of the, you know, most ominous cards in the whole entire deck. It represents treachery, lies, and betrayal. It can represent a person or situation that does not have one's best interest in mind. So snake can represent an alternative person. And in most cases, traditionally, we're going to see snake as the other person in a relationship, whether that's men or women. Traditionally, it's typically the other woman, but I've also seen it be just another third party to a relationship or someone that's interfering in a relationship. Also, if you do a reading and someone wants to know if they have a curse on them or any type of black magic is being done against them and you see snake, that's definitely a warning sign that there's someone that is interfering and is definitely trying to complicate things. Snake can also represent possible corruption or deception, and it's really a very selfish kind of deception where it's very cruel. It has a very cruel energy to it. Snake can be a selfish person or a selfish person or a behavior acting as with a secret agenda. So there's something secret going on here. There's usually an energy of there's someone against something. Snake can be also read as, shedding old skins and healing and stuff like that too. But that's more of like a new agey kind of concept of snake. In this video, we want to stick to just the main traditional meanings. And in alternative videos, when we go forward, I'll be doing meanings based off of other types of like contexts. Number 8 is coffin, ending, tragedy, and loss. So coffin can represent tragedy and loss. There's a very sad energy around coffin. Something's coming to an end. Coffin can represent a situation that is ending. Coffin can also represent possible illness, a condition, or a disease. Coffin can represent going through a very tough transformation, a very tough change. And coffin usually means that there's going to be a great upheaval and change entering one's life. And on coffin is another one of those cards too, where you kind of want to look at the directions. On the left-hand side of coffin, you can kind of see what is ending or what has ended. On the right-hand side of coffin, you can see what is going to be ending. So that's one way you can get a present tense or past tense with the coffin card. Number 9 is bouquet. Bouquet means courtship. It's a gift. It's a helping hand. It's a very, very positive card. Bouquet is a very good omen. It can represent a helping hand or a deal that one can count on. Bouquet represents courtship and dating. So like wooing someone. Think about when you receive a bouquet. You receive a bouquet as a thank you. You receive a bouquet when someone has affection for you. You have a bouquet when you're getting married. Generally speaking, you have a bouquet of flowers around you when you want to feel happy. Bouquet can also represent a gift given from appreciation. It can also represent a social invitation, especially if you have it paired with garden. So if you had bouquet and garden next to each other, or bouquet and letter, or bouquet and writer, something along those lines, you could definitely see it as a social invitation. Bouquet can also just be simply an enjoyable person or a situation. So it can just be talking about someone's character. And typically speaking, has one's best interest in mind. So it's kind of like the antithesis of like snake. where snake is like someone that does not have your best interest in mind and wants to like take you down, whereas bouquet is one of those cards where it's like they do have your best interest in mind and they want to help you. Especially if you have it paired with dog. That's another good combination. The next card is Scythe, number 10. And Scythe is cutting, harvesting, and clearing. So Scythe is another one of those you want to read the left and the right hand side of it to get context here. Scythe means the removal of a person or a situation. It can also mean a sharp and sudden decision or action. Scythe can be a warning of danger, especially if you have fox or snake around there. You can just be assured that something fishy is kind of going on and you might want to pay attention. It can also represent an accident or a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. Scythe also represents harvesting the fruits of one's labors, which is more of the new agey kind of concept to it, but I went ahead and threw that in there anyway. So if you're reading on the left-hand side of Scythe, you can see what has been cut. And then if you're reading on the right-hand side, you can see what will be cut or what will be harvested. Number 11 is Whip. Whip represents argument, strife, and dispute. Whip represents a strenuous person or a situation. It can represent arguments, strife, and disputes. It can also represent a laborious activity, something that's just kind of difficult to, achieve or overcome. That's going to require a lot of manpower to do. Whip can also represent a fight or a conflict for dominance or control, especially if you have Tower next to it. And whip can also simply mean anger, abuse, and or a violent nature. Number 12, birds. Birds represents gossip or a rendezvous or negotiations. Birds typically represents a conversation between multiple people. It can also represent gossip and rumors. There is this energy of birds. We think about birds flighting from here or there, flittering about, talking amongst themselves, chitter-chattering. It's very noisy, right? So we think about birds as kind of like an anxious person or a situation, an anxious kind of discussion. It can also represent restlessness, being tense, or being uneasy. But it can also represent a meeting. So it can represent a rendezvous or an intimate meeting, just kind of depending on the other cards around it. I've also seen birds kind of represent like an older couple. That's kind of another sort of meaning to it that I didn't really put in here. But for me personally, to be able to see that, I would need to see, like the man or woman nearby, or I would need to see other cards that kind of back that kind of situation up. Let's say garden or bouquet or something along those lines. But it has an energy of intimacy, and it's kind of like, that kind of conversation you have with a friend where you're not worried about what other people think. You're just kind of talking about things, and it's kind of like you're just talking things out. 13 is child, and child represents innocence, naivete, and spontaneity. So child represents innocence and naivete, something new and fresh. Child also represents a situation or a person that is immature or young. So if you have child next to the woman card, it could be a young girl, or it could simply be personality-wise, someone who has a very immature or young type of look or behavior about them. Child can also represent a fresh start or a do-over. And child can represent an immature and responsible but fun and exciting person or situation. Fox, 14. Fox can represent caution, deception, and cleverness. Not quite as harsh as the snake card, where the snake is someone that's just kind of meddling, or a situation that's just kind of meddling for fun. Fox is more about the opportunity, and fox is more about survival or watching out for oneself. So fox represents a caution to be on the lookout for minor deception and white lies. So it's kind of like, if your best friend asks you if you like their outfit and you really don't, and you just say, yeah, it looks great because you don't want to upset your friend, that would be a situation where the fox could represent it. Fox can also represent watching out for oneself first before others. So it is a little bit of a selfish card, but in most cases typically speaking, there's not going to be much harm. Um, it's not going to be catastrophic. Fox can also represent a situation or a person of opportunity who must use their cunning to win. So it could be that, a situation is a puzzle and you have to use your cleverness to be able to, figure it out, or you're going to have to think about this in a way that isn't, aligned with your traditional thinking. It can also represent an immoral action taken for one's survival. So if you're, an example of fox would be if someone was starving and maybe they stole a loaf of bread or they stole something from the gas station because they didn't have any money and they needed to eat. That would be kind of like one of the situations fox would fall under. Now, also, in some traditions, fox can represent work and opportunity. I tend to not use fox for that, but I have seen it kind of come up, and it's kind of up to you if you want to use fox for that. Number 15 is bear. Bear is about protection, resources, and power. And I just saw that I made a little tiny mistake there, so I'm going to have to fix that, and we'll get that fixed. So bear represents a strong and somewhat overbearing person or situation. Bear can represent also your financial assets, such as like investments, your retirement, 401k, and inheritances. If you have bear and you have house, that could represent real estate. Bear can also represent a boss or someone who is a very controlling or authoritative type of person, someone who's overbearing. Bear can also represent a fierce and powerful protector. Think about bear as like a mama bear. Think about someone who wants to protect someone at all costs. Number 16, stars. Stars represents healing, recovery, and it can also be your network. So stars represents a situation or a person that inspires hope. It can also represent recovery from an illness, a condition, or even a disease. So if you have coffin and then you have star, it could also, represent overcoming that illness. Stars can also represent one's goals, hopes, and aspirations, your ambitions. Star can represent your reputation and your social status. So think about stars as in your social network, your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, those types of things. And stars can also represent a professional network. Who are your professional contacts and connections? Number 17 is stork. Stork represents improvement, upgrade, and relocation. It's a very great card to have. And stork can represent relocation. It can also represent a short-term travel, such as like a trip or a vacation. I've also seen it come up with like elderly clients who are wanting to buy a second house somewhere because they want to be snowbirds. If you don't know what a snowbird is, a snowbird is someone who travels in one place during one part of the year and another place in the other part of the year, and it's usually because of weather. Stork can also represent an upgrade or improvement in one's life. So it could be like having a better job offer or getting a promotion. It can represent an opportunistic change in one's job, career, or even their love life. And sometimes it can represent pregnancy. Again, that's kind of like one of the newer age kind of meanings that have been prescribed to this, but I went ahead and threw it in anyway, especially if you see stork and child next to each other or stork and tree. Number 18 is dog. Dog is loyal, dependable, and trustworthy. Dog represents a loyal and trustworthy friend. Dog can be a situation or a person that is really dependable. You can rely on it, especially with bouquet. Could be your best friend. Dog can also represent help or assistance. Dog can represent an amiable and enthusiastic nature. And dog can also represent a mutually beneficial relationship. So when you are doing a love reading and you want to do a reading on the fidelity of, say, a partner, and dog comes up, that's a very good omen that they are loyal and trustworthy. Or if you are doing a reading on someone's intentions towards you and dog shows up, it's pretty much a good sign. Number 19 is Tower. Tower is and can be an institution. It can also be an authority, but it can also be influence as well. So Tower can be an institution within hierarchy, such as a bank or a school or a government. Tower can also be a situation or a person with a great deal of authority and influence. Tower can be feelings of being imprisoned or isolated, or even feelings of being disempowered, being the princess or the person in the tower looking out, feeling isolated, kind of depends on the other cards around. But Tower can also represent simply just dominance and control. #20 is Garden. Garden can be a gathering place, a public place, or a community. So garden is a social gathering such as a party, a reunion, a concert. It has a lot of people around, or it's a very public space. Garden can also be a situation or a person in the public eye or out in the open. So it could be talking about a famous person, or it could be talking about a situation that's kind of like out in the open. Garden can also be one's place or role in their community. And garden can also be one's public persona and reputation. 21 is Mountain. Mountain is an obstacle, a challenge, or even a delay. Mountain can be an obstacle or a challenge to face. It can be delays, and these are usually significant delays, and possible problematic events. Something might go awry, especially if you have it with snake. There's going to be complications. Mountain can also be a very difficult situation or a person to deal with. And mountain can be an uphill battle that will take time to work through. 22 is Crossroad, or you may also see this as Path. Crossroad represents choices, options, or even being in an impasse. Crossroad represents a fork in the road, or even a decision to be made before moving forward. Crossroad represents multiple possible scenarios or choices in front of you. And then typically on the right-hand side, it will kind of discuss the different choices. Or if you are doing a reading where you need to make a choice, you could find Crossroad, and then you could pull the cards on the left-hand side, put it in one pile, the cards on the right-hand side, and put it in one pile. And then you could do kind of like a pros and cons based off of, those two choices. Crossroad can also represent a short delay from an impasse or a stalemate. And crossroad can also represent a hesitation to commit to one situation or person over another. 23 is Mice. Mice represents thievery, stress, and worry. Mice represents stress and anxiety and worry about a situation or a person. Mice also can represent thievery or even being stolen from, resulting in a financial burden. Typically, we think about mice and they tend to destroy things, don't they? So mice can also represent deterioration, damages, the breaking down of something. And typically when we see mice, we kind of understand that something should be or could be or must be replaced. 24, Heart. Heart represents love, desire, and passion. Heart represents following one's heart. Heart represents a romantic or a passionate situation or a person. Heart can also represent making decisions based on emotions instead of logic. Personality-wise, heart can represent generosity, kindness, and even charity. And it can also represent an emotional situation or person. 25, ring. Ring represents commitment, dedication, and promise. Ring represents following through on a commitment. It can symbolize a promise or even a vow. Ring is typically a contract or some type of agreement. It can also be a proposal or an engagement of marriage or even a business proposal. Ring is also a situation or person that is dedicated and predictable. "26, book. Book represents something that's hidden, can also represent secret knowledge, and it can represent research. So book represents research and academic learning. It can also represent education and studies. Book also represents truth that is hidden or not obviously revealed yet, something you're going to have to look into or do research on. Book can also represent secret knowledge that is being withheld. And book can also represent rules, contracts, and or policies. By the book. 27, letter. Letter represents messages, information, and correspondence. Letter represents messages and correspondence. Pertinent information, so very important information. Letter can also be tangible and digital files and or documents. Personality-wise, it can be a very communicative and talkative kind of situation or person. I've also seen letter come up as like a pen pal or writing letters to home. And letter can also represent a traditional or orthodox approach to something. Especially if you have letter and book next to each other, it's kind of like, this is the way it's always been, or this is the best way to do it. 28 is man, and in this deck, I decided to give you two different types of man cards, or you can simply read them as masculine. They don't necessarily have to be men, but you can read them as masculine. And one of the men I gave you is jovial, friendly, and honest. And the other man I gave you is secretive, mysterious, and seductive. So a little bit of a nuance difference here in the context of the meaning. But typically speaking, these represent actual people in the reading. Same with the woman card. I gave you the jovial, friendly, honest woman. She's looking at you face to face. And then the woman that's secretive, mysterious, and seductive, she has a leaf kind of over her face. So kind of gives the idea that she's hiding something. And again, these are going to represent actual people in the reading, or they represent the querent themselves. 30 is lily. Lily represents maturity, peace, and wisdom. So lily represents wisdom gained from experience. Lily also represents a mature situation or a person. And it could just be maturity, or it could be also elderly as well. Lily represents peace, serenity, and relaxation. So think of like a retreat or a spa type of feeling. The need to relax, basically. Or that everything's okay. I've also seen lily come up as like a white flag of surrender, like acceptance. And lily as a person can be a person with seniority, tenure, or precedence, or a situation with seniority, tenure, or precedence over another. So let's say if you're doing a reading on crossroad and you got lily in one of the sides of the crossroad, that could mean that this situation or this option has precedence over the other. 31 is sun. Sun is pretty easy. It represents happiness, resolution, and success. Sun is a happy, optimistic, and creative situation or person. It can also mean a resolution to a problematic situation. So if you had like snake and then sun, or if you had fox and then sun, or you had mountain and sun, any of these kind of delay or mice and sun, it pretty much shows that there is going to be a resolution and the problematic situation is going to be over. Sun can also represent a victory, success, and a positive outcome. Sun can also mean that truth is revealed. So if you had clouds and then you had sun, it means that the truth will be revealed. Sun can also represent confidence and courage. So if you had mountain and then sun, or you had sun and then mountain, it could represent that you have the courage to overcome any possible delays or complications. 32 is moon. Moon represents recognition, fame, but also intuition. Moon can represent one's professional reputation through fame and notoriety, especially if you have garden and moon kind of next to each other. Moon can represent your imagination, having to be creative, and it can also represent, your artistic capacity. So where, thinking in terms of like heart, thinking in terms of like using emotion over logic. This one kind of says you're going to have to use your creativity and maybe your logic kind of combined together. It can also represent your intuition, your psychic insight, your feelings, how you feel about things. And moon can also represent your inner nature, and it talks about like your personal habits and cyclical rhythms that you might be going through. And it's also great. I love getting the moon card when I'm asking about timing, because it's usually, within 1 month. And we'll do a whole video about timing and stuff like that. 33 is key. 33 key represents solution, access, and revelation. Key represents one's destiny or karmic fate. Key can also represent the answer or solution to a problem. So anything after key on the right-hand side says, okay, this is how you solve the problem, or okay, this is what the solution is. Key can also represent a spiritual revelation or epiphany or an awakening, especially if you have it next to moon, a psychic insight or a flash of insight. Key can represent a situation or a person of significant importance. And key can also symbolize overcoming challenges. 34, fish. Fish is abundant, lucrative, and it can also represent currency. So fish is your cash flow and your currency. Fish can also be a smart business deal or offer. Fish can also represent a person who is affluent, wealthy, or self-sufficient. It can also represent a lucrative financial opportunity. And fish can also represent something of significant value and worth, even if it's intangible as far as the financial value goes. If someone really values it and they place a lot of value on it, fish can be a descriptive kind of card for that. For example, like a heirloom or something like that. 35, anchor. Anchor represents endurance, fixation, and also stability. So anchor is a situation or a person that is stable and enduring. A situation that is long-lasting, you're putting your anchor down. Anchor can also represent putting down one's roots and settling down for a while, especially if house is nearby or tree is nearby. Anchor can represent a time of contentment, of happiness, especially with sun nearby. But anchor can also represent feelings of safety. And finally, 36, cross. Cross represents obligation and burden and sorrow. Cross represents a situation or a person who is a burden. It can also represent an unfavorable obligation. Cross can represent a sorrowful and sad event, especially with coffin nearby. Typically speaking, cross is a symbol of grief and suffering and loss. Cross can also represent a punishment, especially if you have whip nearby, a punishment or having to bear one's cross. Thank you for watching this video, and if you found this training helpful, please consider liking the video with a thumbs up and then subscribing to my channel for future notifications. And I'm going to be doing a lot of Lenormand videos in the future. And if you really did like this video, I encourage you to share this video with your friends, your Facebook groups, post it on your social media, whatever you like. I also have a free Facebook group called The Profitable Psychic, and there is a link below in the description box and in the pinned comment where you can join. And here are my social media links. So I'm on Instagram as Tarot Biz Mentor. My group is Heart Centered Spiritual Biz Support as the link. The name is The Profitable Psychic. And I'm on YouTube as the Tarot Biz Mentor. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.